The Body in the Attic, a Jazzi Zanders mystery. Book 1, by Judi Lynn. Narrated by Devon Sorvery. Chapter 1. It was sweltering. The sun beat down, and perspiration dripped along Jazzi's spine. Uncomfortable and impatient, she wished the auctioneer would hurry up. She wanted this house. She and her cousin, Jerod, had walked through it, top to bottom, at the initial showing, and hadn't seen any major problems. They'd flipped houses together for 4 years now, mostly successes. Jerod rambled back to stand beside her. Tall and hefty, he towered over her. At 5'6", she didn't consider herself short, but the top of her head came only to Jerod's chin. "We should get this at a decent price," he told her. "To buy it as is, along with all the garbage the renter left inside, scares most people. The ones I talked to came to bid on the 70 Nova found in the garage." Good news. Cal Juniper's house had good bones and oozed charm. A cobblestone cottage style with a rolled roof and an eyebrow near the front door. It was 2 stories with a storybook feel. The roof was in good shape. The trim just needed a little paint. They'd barely made a profit on their last flip, but they'd be making only cosmetic changes to this one. Once upon a time, Cal had almost become a part of their family. Jazzi still remembered stories about Aunt Linda's engagement party here. People said Cal had beamed all night as if he'd won the grand prize. Linda's vitality made people feel alive. That was before she ran off to New York and never returned. Cal never married. He died 6 months ago of a sudden heart attack. The house went downhill fast after that. Jerod bumped her arm, signaling for her to pay attention. The bidding would start soon. Jazzi's hair stuck to the back of her neck, and she lifted it to cool off. She and her hair had a love-hate relationship. Thick and honey-colored, she got lots of compliments on it, but on hot days, if she didn't slap it into a ponytail, she always regretted it. She'd pulled it up today, but the stupid rubber band had died. Her own fault. If she'd have looked for her hair tie like she should have, this wouldn't have happened. Jerod glanced at her and shook his head. "What's the matter, Jasmine? Can't take the heat?" She tossed him a sour look. He only called her by her birth name to annoy her. "Shut it, cuz. Maybe you should clean out this one yourself." He grinned. She'd already told him she couldn't wait to get inside the place and get down and dirty. Dirty was the key word. The renter threw everything. Empty pizza boxes, drained beer cans, and greasy paper wrappers on the floor. A fly and rodent's paradise. She didn't want to know how many maggots were happily living in there. The auctioneer finally got to the car, and bidding went crazy. The good news? After a gray-haired guy with black grease under his fingernails, most likely a mechanic, got it, the crowd thinned out. Jerod had been right. Not many people were interested in the house. Jazzi was even more surprised when everyone else dropped out at $56,000 and they won the bid. Jerod raised his hand for a high five. "We did it! I'm going to give Ansel a call and let him know." Ansel. Their tall, blonde construction contractor. Quite the distraction. Jazzi wished he were here. He worked with them on most houses. He'd meant to come with them today, but this was his girlfriend's, Emily's, first day off after 3 12-hour shifts, and she'd informed him he was spending time with her. He never went against Emily's orders. At 6'5", he was taller than Jerod, but thoroughly under the thumb of a 5'4" nurse. He had white blonde hair and sky-blue eyes, looking like a Viking, but was easygoing. Emily wasn't. If all people with Norwegian backgrounds looked like Ansel, Jazzi would welcome Norwegian immigrants to River Bluffs with open arms, and possibly groping hands. If only Emily weren't in the way. She stayed to finalize the paperwork with the auctioneer, while Jerod made his call. They'd worked with this auction house many times, always paying cash so they could start work right away. She braced her shoulders and walked into the house. Putrid pulled pork, sour milk, and moldy tomato sauce combined into a foul stench. She couldn't stomach it and walked to her pickup truck to don a white face mask. She grabbed 2 flat-blade shovels and a box of trash bags, too. A broom wasn't going to cut it. When Jerod joined her, he dragged in the huge trash container they'd brought with them. She handed him his face mask, and he slapped it in place. The living room was monstrous, spanning the front of the house to the back. They spent the next 4 hours slogging through stinking, sweaty work. The tenant must have lived in this room, maybe even sleeping on the sofa. Its cushions permanently sagged and were covered with stains she didn't want to think about. When they finished, the room stood completely empty. The dining room was bereft of table or chairs. The kitchen had a long work table that served as an island. It was so filthy, there was no way she was ever going to get it clean. Jazzi looked at the avocado green stove and shook her head. It was history. She opened the pink refrigerator and quickly slammed the door. Things might live in there she didn't want to meet. The countertops and sink were covered with dirty plates and utensils with remnants of rotting food. At one time, Cal had professional Viking appliances in here. Jazzi sighed. Remember how this kitchen looked when Cal was alive? Mom said Lynda loved to give parties and to entertain. This was the perfect house for it. I'm guessing the tenant sold anything worth anything, Jerod said. It's a good thing he was too lazy to bother with the attic. It had some interesting antiques stored in it when they'd done the walkthrough. Jazzi held up a hand and motioned to the side door. She needed some fresh air. Jerod nodded and followed her into the backyard. A rusted, dead gas grill sat on the patio, a tire tilted against the garage. Jazzi shook her head and went to the garden hose. Using lots of soap, she scrubbed her hands and arms. Finally satisfied, she walked to her pickup to open the cooler on the back seat. Lots of ice and lots of beer. She needed something stronger than soda for this job. Jerod twisted the cap on his bottle and walked into the shade of an old oak. Who could live like this? You'd think the fumes would kill you. Jazzi took a long swig of cold beer. We should have bought a window air conditioner and plugged it in before we started. Jerod motioned to a unit sitting at the side of the house. According to the auction brochure, we have central air. Yeah, right. When they'd switched it on, nothing had happened. Jerod drained his bottle and belched. On purpose. When was the man ever going to grow up? He was 29, 2 years older than she was. Would 30 be the magic number? Somehow she doubted it. The upstairs is pretty much empty, remember? Jerod shook his head. The bum sold all the antiques, probably paid for his pot. They'd found 2 broken bongs in the living room. She went to their food cooler and grabbed 2 deli sandwiches. She handed one to Jerod. I'm starving, but I had to get the stink out of my nose before I could eat. Jerod had finished his sandwich and gone for another before she was halfway through hers. The good news is that we're making money with sweat equity. So far, we haven't found any expensive repairs. It's still early. She finished her sandwich and pulled her mask in place, then headed back inside the house. 3 hours later, she was starving again, but neither she nor Jerod wanted to stop work until the kitchen was finished. If they stopped now, Jazzi wasn't sure if she could stomach it again.